make a move as soon as possible.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
their second move. Remember, they signed Alex Henry as a replacement for Nate Freese, who wasn't doing the job. So the Lions will have their third kicker come next week.
They'll be running some kicker tryouts there for sure. Let's switch over now. Looking around here, a lot of good games yesterday here, and some of the games were surprising because a lot of these games were low scoring at halftime. Like I remember, we're watching the Browns game and we're looking at all the halftime scores and going, man, it's a bad fantasy football week. There's some defensive performances. By the time some of these games ended, all the scores are in the 30s to 20 and all in the, you got a lot of upper scoring games. But it was funny because a lot of these games at halftime, you had some 6-3 games, some 10-7 games. You had some lower scoring first halves for a lot of these games, and I just noticed that. But, looking around the AFC North, before we get to the Browns, I definitely want to ask you your thoughts about that. But up and down for the other teams in the AFC North, start with Cincinnati. They get knocked off. We were talking about New England for last week. We were joking about, is there questions with the quarterback? And what's so funny is I'm sure you saw them because we all look at the same websites. Some of the articles that were pitched out this weekend about how the beginning of the end for Brady in New England, and the coaching staff's already plotting how they can tank Brady and get I'm telling you, it's just so funny. I'm like one bad beginning to the season, and this is already happening in New England, but they very quickly showed people that the demise may have been a little prematurely reported there for the Patriots.
Yeah, I love the NFL. I mean, it is, it's one game a week, and you see these. It's almost like looking at a social bipolar disorder of a whole market from week to week. 1 week Tom Brady's done, the three-time Super Bowl winner. At worst, one of the 5 best quarterbacks who ever lived, simply can't play anymore. And then all of a sudden, he lays, 40 plus on what was the best team in football. Through the first 4 weeks of the season, everybody's saying how good Cincinnati, the most well-balanced team, blah, blah, blah. It tells you never get too high, you never get too low. But it also says, how even these teams are as a whole. And that's what this league is based on. It's a parity-driven league where you have these, opponents on your schedule that you're going to get wins over. It's not like that in the NFL. And anytime you got Tom Brady on the schedule, you better show up and play, or otherwise he's going to embarrass you. And that's what happened last night. I mean, obviously, home field means so much in the NFL these days. That has something to do with the fact that New England was embarrassed the week before. That has something to do with it. I would say, these people who play the win and loss game when the schedule comes out, it's so silly because it's not who you play; it's when you play them.
Yep.
And you never want to face New England in Foxborough after a loss the way they lost. I mean, I think they're 33 or 34-4 after a loss in the past 10 years or so. It's a team that just knows how to respond, and one of the reasons why is the quarterback. That said, first time I saw what I thought the Patriots were going to be when they traded in Tim Wright, the tight end from Tampa Bay. I thought they were going back to that Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez mentality, where they were going to use the 2 tight ends. And they did that, and they did it well against Cincinnati, but they hadn't done it before then. So I was kind of surprised it took them that long to get to it, because they don't have a lot of threats at wide receiver outside the numbers. But those 2 guys can catch the football, stretch the defense in a different way than you usually think. And nobody's done it better than New England in the past using that type of offense. So the biggest surprise for me is that it took them so long to get to it. And then the second aspect of it was it took them too long to let Darrelle Revis loose and say, okay, you go get the best wide receiver, shut him down, and then we'll play with the other 2 guys and do what we want to do defensively. That's the first time they did it all year, and I'm a little bit surprised. Bill Belichick is usually ahead of the curve, a little behind it this year, which is is the biggest surprise to me. But the Patriots are still the heavy favorite in that division, and they're right there.
And they sit 2-2 right now, so it's not like we're doing all this about a team that's just they're 500 through 4 games, plenty of time to hit their stride and get things going. And
they're actually 3-2, so.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry.
Buffalo are 3-2,
yeah,
so
I'm sorry.
They're right at the top. Like you never expect the Patriots to have 2 losses 5 weeks in, but 5 games in. But I mean, it's a bad division as a whole. I think we just talked about the Jets, what a mess they are. I do think Buffalo made the right decision going away from E.J. Manuel and going with Kyle Orton, and they squeaked out a win in Detroit thanks to Alex Henry, which we mentioned.
Yes.
But nobody looks at them as a serious contender. Nobody looks at Miami, so it's almost the Patriots by default.
Yeah, I just I pulled it up while you were talking there. I'm sure you saw it. I got a kick out of it from this came up Saturday, and of course now they've edited it to add the win to it, and they've made a few changes. But yeah, ESPN Boston put out the tension between Brady and the coaches could influence where he ends his career. A change could be made sooner rather than later. Like, come on, man! Like, really?
Unfortunately, that's the way.
It's the media.
So
it's
much
a function
more
of
media
it.
today.
Yeah, I agree. I know that.
Sometimes guys, they do. I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes people throw things off the wall, and
it gets clicks,
because you
man.
look at it. You look at the history of this league. And think about Brett Favre going from Green Bay to Minnesota. You think about.
Yep.
You go back even further, and you think about. Joe Montana, finishing up in Kansas
City. Yep.
Joe Namath finishing up with the Rams in Los Angeles. It's happened a number of times where these legendary quarterbacks finish up somewhere. Heck, Peyton Manning in Denver.
Even here, Bernie Kosar finished with the Cowboys. Bill Belichick put him out to pasture.
Yeah. So it's not like it doesn't happen. So you can kind of throw it out there and say, because inevitably everybody goes into that downswing. And generally, players are the last people that want to admit it and want to admit they can't play anymore. So a situation where you do have some of these legendary figures move on. So it's an easy thing to say, and it might happen down the road. It's not happening now. It's not happening.
That's my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, man. It's funny. And I keep pointing out stuff like that because I'm like, people think that only happens here in Cleveland. No, it happens everywhere. Media's got stories to write in every town. It's not just here. We just give them the most fodder to work with most years, And hey, speaking of articles, it's the perfect segue. Let's go from the other teams. Let's go to the Browns here. And I saw Peter King, Monday Morning Quarterback, giving some kudos to Brian Hoyer here. And much deserved, I think. I brought up at the beginning of the show Friday, one of the guys previewing the show with me used that game manager term, and I said, you know what, I got to be honest, I don't agree with that term. I know what you mean by it, but to me, a game manager is a more limited person. I think Brian Hoyer is showing that, yes, he can go out there and not just not lose you a game, but he can go out and win. He can play some football, man, so anyways, we were talking about that Friday, and then here you see once again, not only another victory as the Browns starting quarterback, but another one coming from behind. We can talk about how they got behind and all of that, but what were your thoughts on Hoyer and on the Browns? And I mean, that's not only the biggest comeback victory in Cleveland Browns franchise history. It's the biggest road comeback in NFL history. No road team has ever come back from as many points as the Browns did yesterday in Nashville, and third biggest in regular season history, period. I mean, that's definitely more than just your average comeback.
Yeah, I don't want to downgrade it all. I mean, part of it's the era.
Oh, it's Tennessee. I know that. I know that.
I mean, here in Philadelphia, for instance, Austin Davis was probably a dropped Austin Pettis pass away from leading a 27-point comeback. So you might have had the 2 biggest road comebacks. You were this close to having the 2 biggest road comebacks in NFL history on the same Sunday, and the people leading them were Brian Hoyer and Austin Davis.
Because that's the way it wrote up. That's the way everybody planned it, you know?
Exactly. And, and I don't want to, because both have played tremendously to this point. And, I just wrote about Austin Davis today and the fact that, he's had 3 starts and his worst passer rating was 98 in those 3 starts. And Sam Bradford did that 10 times in his 49 NFL starts. So we constantly talk about this pedigree, Whedon and Ponder and Smith. Sometimes these guys are better. And, what Brian Hoyer and Austin Davis have is an opportunity. We constantly talk about it with Hoyer. And he's doing everything he can with his opportunity to keep it and to keep playing well and to keep moving forward. And then obviously, I saw people tweeting at halftime it was time to put Johnny Manziel in. So the margin of error is so small for these guys because the minute something starts to go wrong, people start looking at the other guy. But you got to give him a ton of credit because, the bottom line is, as you mentioned, the largest road comeback in NFL history belongs to that quarterback. And to me, there shouldn't even be a conversation. Nobody should be looking at the sideline of Johnny Manziel. I not even barring an injury, of course.
You know what?
He has earned his spot. He's the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, and he's the guy who gives them the best chance to win. There's always mitigating circumstances, I said, because pedigree means more than anything in the NFL. And I'm not saying that's the way it's going to roll, because if things go badly next week against Pittsburgh, same thing's going to crop up. People are going to say, okay, it's time to put Johnny Manziel. That's just Brian Hoyer's existence, but he doesn't deserve it. He's earned this job.
I got to tell you, I think that he's taking steps to changing that existence. I know it's going to be hard, and it's more than just what, but I mean, each one of these that you pile up in the book, it all of a sudden makes it a little bit harder to overlook. But you mentioned looking to the sidelines for Manziel. I wanted to bring this point up about the game. I don't know if you saw it from your vantage point, but I know we had a lot of listeners catch it. I saw it as soon as it happened, and it was definitely a bad look, and I'm sure Mike Pettin will be asked about it in his press conference today. But when the Browns were trailing that game 28-3, the camera flashes over to the sideline on 2 consecutive occasions and catches Johnny Manziel laughing it up on the sidelines with somebody, which regardless, nobody, there's cameras everywhere and nobody knows when they're being looked at, but it comes across as a terrible look. And I mean, I had people hit me up like, look at this kid. He's having a good time on the sidelines while we're getting blown out. And what was a contrast was the very next 2 camera shots was Mike Pettin and Brian Hoyer, and both of them are sitting there stone-faced trying to, figure out where they're going to go and what they're going to do. And I thought, man, it was just something. I'm like, man, sometimes you can't avoid the camera there, because it was just a bad look when your team's at that point trailing by 25 points and you're caught laughing it up on the sidelines. It definitely doesn't come across well.
No, it doesn't. And, I'm not going to pile on him there.
I just wondered if you saw it.
Yeah, I did. And, there's plenty of things to criticize him about. Before I get to that, it's funny. On Saturday, I was watching Mississippi State play Texas A&M, and it was a close game at the time. And for some reason, they put the camera on there was a stoppage in play. Somebody was hurt, I think, and they put the camera on the Mississippi State sideline. And there's this kid chatting up this attractive photographer.
I didn't see that, but that's great.
I swear to God, he was trying to pick her up on the sideline. And, I'm like, please take the camera off this poor kid. He's going to get killed. And they wouldn't do it, and they kept it on there, and I'm just like, you're right. They don't know when the camera is, and it's not like, I understand why fans get upset about it, because they're so upset when the team is losing. But you really have to have a different mentality to actually play the game. You can't let things affect you that way, so emotionally. And that's why you see guys after a loss, they don't take it nearly as hard as fans do.